Final Fantasy XIII-2. I guess I should start out this review by saying what I thought of the first Final Fantasy XIII. God, that feels weird to say. Okay, so Final Fantasy XIII, honestly, I didn't hate like most people. But then again, it was pretty much my first Final Fantasy game. Stone me if you will. But even disregarding that, I just don't see why it's such a bad game. It's linear, yes. Some of the characters may be unlikable. The story is incoherent most of the time. And the battle system does not allow for a lot of strategy. That's true. But it looks gorgeous. It has pretty good voice acting. It's fun to play and watch. It's challenging. Overly challenging. And maybe this game does kind of suck. I still like it though. And I loved most of the characters. And I just have a soft spot for it because it's pretty much the game that made me like Final Fantasy and JRPGs in general. And I know so many of you in the comments are going to hate me for that. Anyways, 2 years after Final Fantasy XIII's release, we got a sequel. I don't know if anybody really asked for it, but beggars can't be choosers, I guess. I don't know if I used that right. Anyways, I didn't jump right into the sequel, mostly because I hadn't beaten the first Final Fantasy XIII. And to me, it just seemed like a bit of a cash-in. But after beating Final Fantasy XIII, I thought, why not? And went ahead and got Final Fantasy XIII-2. And that's where we are today. Alright, first of all, with the gameplay, a lot of this stuff is unchanged, like the battle system. But you don't really fix what ain't broken, and the battle system in Final Fantasy XIII was not particularly broken. There were a few things that needed updating, which they updated. The main concern with Final Fantasy XIII's battle system, for me anyways, was just a little thing, but it really screwed you over sometimes. And that was when you first shifted a paradigm in battle, it always triggered the animation. Afterwards, it never did it, but if you're in a bind and really need to quickly transfer your paradigm, that 5 seconds of animation can really screw you over because nothing stays still. The enemy can still attack you. And if you're going to a medic and you have 50 HP left and you need to be healed right then, one attack will kill you and make you restart the entire battle. In Final Fantasy XIII-2, they get rid of that. They make the paradigm shifts pretty much instant, which is a very nice touch and just a little thing that really helps out. But it feels a lot more polished than Final Fantasy XIII. And I can't really explain why. Maybe it's just because it just feels like a sequel, and all sequels should be better. I don't know. I can't really explain it, but if you played it and get the same feeling, you'll know what I'm talking about. One big change they made with the battle system, though, is instead of monsters... One big change they made with the battle system, though, is instead of 3 party members, you only have 2 character party members. And the third slot is open to any monster you can catch. It's basically Pokemon. And you catch the monsters, and they have certain attributes that you can use to your advantage. Like some monsters are synergists, some monsters are sentinels, some monsters are ravagers, and it's just stuff like that. And some have higher levels than others at the start, and you level them up, and you get to level 4 or 5, and they're complete awesome things. One thing a lot of people complained about with the first Final Fantasy XIII that they really fixed in this one was the lack of side quests and towns to explore and such. And they really fixed it in this one by giving a ton of characters into each village you explore. A lot of them having certain missions you could do. They also made each place relevant. I can't really remember any certain area or village from Final Fantasy XIII. And it may just be because I played it over the span of 2 years, and I just played Final Fantasy XIII-2. I like to think that maybe Final Fantasy XIII just had a little bit more life to it, if you know what I mean. Another thing they changed, which was kind of odd, but it makes sense story-wise, I guess, is random battles. Originally, in Final Fantasy XIII, the monsters you fought were just creatures walking around. You walk up to them, you trigger a fight, unless it's like a scripted fight. And in this one, the monsters just appear out of basically nowhere. It doesn't force you into battle, though, which is nice. But a lot of times, you can't really escape. And there's no run button or anything. So if you're in a hurry and trying to play just for like 30 minutes and you get into a bunch of battles, it gets really, really annoying fast. But there's only 2 places where I can really think that it was super annoying. One of the more controversial changes they made, or it may not be controversial at all, because I don't know a lot of Final Fantasy fans that really hate every new Final Fantasy. But they added dialogue choices, and I guess not really morality choices, since there's not a lot of morality, but there's definitely dialogue choices. And at some points, it can even affect your game drastically. Or I guess at some points, it could basically end the game right there, or make you go on. It's neat to have, but it doesn't really add a whole lot to the experience. Unless you're looking for something really funny, because at one point you get a artifact that you need to complete the game, and Sarah can ask how much it would be worth if you sold it. So that's funny. Speaking of the story, I honestly thought it was really good, especially compared to Final Fantasy XIII, which was pretty, like I said before, incoherent, hard to follow, and a little lackluster, honestly. It wasn't that good of a story if you did follow it. And the storytelling was awful because you had to read the data log to fully get everything. And that should not be the case with anything. A lot of Halo fans, for instance, say that the story of Halo is really good if you read the novels. Then what's the point of the story in the game if you have to read something else to understand the story? And it's more drastic with Halo, but with Final Fantasy XIII, you still had to go through 3 different menus to get the data log, and then read 10 minutes worth of text just to figure out what you just saw. And it shouldn't be that difficult. Like, you can have extra stuff in the data log. Like with Mass Effect, it does it pretty well, where you could go into the codex and learn all about the planets, and all about the alien species, and all about the weapons, and whatever you want. But you don't need any of that to fully enjoy the story of Mass Effect. But with Final Fantasy XIII-2, getting back on topic, the story is really woven tightly, and you know everything pretty much that's happening on screen at one time. And in that story, there are honestly some pretty surprising twists that I did not see coming. And it got me really, really excited for the 3rd game in this series, Lightning Returns. Speaking of Lightning, the really weird thing about Final Fantasy XIII-2 was the fact that Lightning is on the cover, Lightning is in a lot of the coverage, but she's in the game for a grand total of like 30 minutes. She's the point of the game. The whole point of the game is for Sarah to find Lightning, of course. But you don't play as her, like, ever, except the beginning. And it really, like, it just feels like marketing that they're so focused on her for Final Fantasy XIII-2. But Lightning Returns, of course. I'm getting off topic. But the characters in this game are honestly, the characters in this game are really likable. Sarah didn't really have a lot of personality in the first game. Aside from she's Lightning's sister and Snow's fiance, and she's kind of cute, and that's why you're saving her. But here she's giving a little more character development, and you grow to like her. And Noel, when I first saw him, I honestly thought, who's this D-bag? But by the end of the game, he was one of my favorite characters of the entire franchise. Not just the Final Fantasy XIII franchise. Final Fantasy in general. Granted, I've only played about 4 different Final Fantasy games, but I can't really say a lot about his character without spoiling some of the game's best moments. But let's just say that if you aren't attached to the character by the 3rd act, you will be. And the last character of the main 3, Mog. Man, screw Mog. If anyone likes that high-pitched, annoying little Moogle, you're wrong. You're just wrong. Like, what kind of character says Kupo after every single little sentence he says? It's so stupid and annoying. I hate him. And the Final Fantasy XIII-2 creators said they put him in as fan service. It's more like fan disservice. Thank you, TV Tropes, for that joke. I can't lie, though. There is one thing I love about Mog. It's the fact that you can throw him. Of course, on the opposite side of the main characters, you have the main antagonist, who, unlike the first Final Fantasy XIII, is actually a single, coherent villain. In Final Fantasy XIII, you're not really sure who the villain is until the end, because it just jumps around so much. You think, oh, it's Cid, or is it Barthandelus, or is it this Sarah Palin chick? But in this one, it's just one villain, and that's Caius. And he's pretty freaking awesome. And he's a really good villain, too. He doesn't want to take over the world, sort of. He doesn't want to get any personal gain, sort of. He just does it for one person. And that's honestly really awesome to me. And of course, no story is made up with just protagonists and antagonists. You also have side characters. And they're all pretty decent in this game, too. And it even made characters like Hope, who I hated in 13, it made me like them over the story. Except Mog. Because nobody likes Mog. Seriously, why is he even here? Going back to the gameplay, though, one thing I adored after I found out was the fact that if there are multiple battles back-to-back, with no break in between, if you die during the battle, it gives you the option to either restart the battle from the beginning, or go back to the last save area. That is so helpful when you're on the last boss of the group, and it's honestly something all JRPGs ever could benefit from having. Persona 3! I still love you, though. And honestly, you're gonna need this feature at the end of the game, because for some reason, in the last level, the difficulty goes from about a 6 or a 7 to 11. But that may have been my fault, so it's not as much of a complaint as it is a warning. I was playing the game on the easiest difficulty because I'm awful at video games and should be ashamed of myself. And I don't know if there's any changes to the experience you get as you go along or what. So I may have brought that upon myself. I don't know. But speaking of the end, it took me 24 hours to beat this game. Granted, I didn't do a whole lot of side quests and such, but it took me 50 hours to get through Final Fantasy XIII, just going on the main storyline and stuff you had to do. And it kind of just blows my mind. Heck, I'm playing Persona 3 right now, and I'm not doing everything you can do. And I'm like halfway through the story and at 48 hours. So Final Fantasy XIII-2 is like the shortest JRPG I've ever played in my life. I even heard it only took about 50 hours to get everything. It's kind of nuts, but I guess if you're... I guess if you have 2 years to make a game, as opposed to how many years they made 13 or any other Final Fantasy, especially when you have to write so much dialogue for the different options, you have to cut corners where you can. And the last topic I want to touch on is the sound of the game. Mostly the voice acting and the soundtrack. The voice acting, like Final Fantasy XIII, is pretty darn good from everyone in the main cast. And there are even some neat little cameos I saw from different voice actors. The main cast, voiced by Laura Bailey as Sarah, Jason Marsden as Noel, Vincent Martella as Hope, etc., they're all really great as they can be. And they put a lot of effort into it, especially Laura and Jason as the two main characters. Which makes sense considering they're the main characters, but you know what I'm getting at. And lastly, the soundtrack. I honestly really like the soundtrack most of the time, and it's very moody and sets the tone when it needs to. There are a couple moments that are really heavy, and the music really adds to it. Except the ending. I'm not going to tell you what happens, because spoilers, obviously. But if you played the game, you'll know what I mean. It's like if you played the Johnny Cash version of Hurt over Dorothy skipping down the yellow brick road in The Wizard of Oz.
I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. The needle tears a hole.
See? It doesn't fit at all. But overall, when I was going into Final Fantasy XIII-2, I expected it to be nothing but a cash-in on the name of the popular Final Fantasy XIII. What I got out of it was not a cash-in, but a game that, honestly, in my eyes, surpasses the first Final Fantasy XIII in nearly every way. The gameplay is more fun. The characters are more interesting and more likable. The story is more interesting and easier to follow. And it's just overall a better game in my opinion. Stone me if you will.